There comes a moment in every life where you stand staring at a hallway of possibilities. You see doors of opportunity, doors of fear, doors of doubt, and doors of destiny. And in that moment, your heart races because you don't know which way to turn. But here's the truth I want you to grab hold of today. God has already chosen the door. You don't have to guess. You don't have to stress. You don't have to try to figure out which one is best. He has already made a way. All that's left is for you to walk through it. When we talk about the idea that the door is already chosen, we are really addressing one of the deepest struggles of human life. The fear that somehow we are lost, directionless, or left to figure everything out by ourselves. Many people live under the pressure of thinking they must design their entire destiny, create their own path, and make sure every decision lines up perfectly, or else they risk missing out on God's plan. But the truth is liberating. God already chose the door. Long before you were born, He had your life in mind. He knew the challenges you would face, and He prepared a path that leads to the exact future He intends for you. The pressure is not on you to manufacture destiny, but simply to recognize and respond to the opportunities God has already placed in your life. This means that the anxiety we often carry about missing it is misplaced. You can't miss what God has already ordained. The door may not always be obvious, and it may not even look attractive, but it is already there. The real challenge is not whether the door exists, but whether we are willing to trust God enough to walk toward it. Many of us hesitate because we fear what lies on the other side. We wonder, what if it's not what I expected? What if I fail? What if this isn't the right one? That hesitation keeps us standing in the hallway of indecision, paralyzed by possibilities. But the beauty of God's choice is that He doesn't need your certainty to fulfill His plan. All He asks is your obedience. Another powerful truth about this idea is that the door is chosen not because of your qualifications, but because of His purpose. Too often, we disqualify ourselves before we even start thinking, I don't have the right skills, the right background, or the right resources. Yet God chooses the door based not on where you are, but on where He is taking you. The very fact that you feel unprepared is often a sign that He has chosen you for something greater than you could imagine. His choice isn't about your comfort zone, it's about your calling. And when you step toward the door He has chosen, He equips you along the way. An excellent example of this can be found in the story of Moses. When God called Moses to lead Israel out of Egypt, it was not a door Moses would have chosen for himself. He had run away from Egypt years before, carrying shame and fear from his past. When God told him to go back, Moses argued, "Who am I to do this?" He doubted his ability to speak, doubted his leadership, and even begged God to send someone else. From his perspective, the door seemed impossible, even dangerous. But from God's perspective, it was already chosen. That was the path through which Israel's freedom would come and Moses' destiny would be fulfilled. Even though Moses hesitated, the door didn't disappear. And when he finally obeyed, stepping through it with trembling faith, he discovered that God had already prepared everything he needed on the other side. This story shows us that the door God chooses is rarely the one that feels easiest, safest, or most convenient. It is, however, always the one that leads to transformation, both for you and for others connected to your obedience. The door you step through may not only unlock your destiny, but also unlock the freedom, healing, or blessing of people around you. And that is why we can trust God's choice even when it doesn't make sense. So the next time you feel uncertain about your future, remember, the door is already chosen. You don't need to create it. You don't need to force it. and you don't need to fear it. All you need to do is trust the one who holds the keys. When you walk in faith, you'll find that what seemed like a risk was actually the safest step you could take, because the door God chooses will always lead to his purpose being fulfilled in your life. When we think about the path to destiny, we often imagine it will look grand, polished, and obvious. We expect God's plan to come wrapped in signs of success or in circumstances that immediately make sense to us. Yet more often than not, the door God chooses doesn't look anything like what we expected. It may appear ordinary, unimpressive, or even like a setback. This is because God often hides greatness in places that seem small and unimportant. What appears to be a limitation is, in fact, the very place where God is preparing you for something far greater than you can see. The truth is that if the door looked exactly like what we dreamed, it would not require faith to walk through it. God uses doors that seem ordinary to test our trust in him. When David was anointed to be king, he wasn't immediately taken to the palace. Instead, his door was a shepherd's field, watching over sheep that no one else cared about. It didn't look like destiny, it looked like obscurity. But in that field, David learned how to protect, how to fight, and how to lead. Those skills, developed in hidden places, prepared him for the throne. What looked small was actually the training ground for greatness. The same pattern plays out in our lives. Many times, the job that seems beneath you, the season that feels frustrating, or the place where you feel overlooked may actually be the door to your next level. God's door may come disguised as difficulty. Joseph's greatest door to influence came not in a comfortable palace, but in a prison cell where he interpreted dreams. It didn't look like destiny, but it was the pathway to it. This means we must be careful not to reject opportunities simply because they don't look glamorous. God doesn't measure destiny by appearances. He measures it by purpose. Another reason the door may not look like what you expect is because God uses humble beginnings to shape your character. If everything looked easy and extraordinary, you might step through with pride or entitlement. But when God places you in an ordinary place, it teaches humility, endurance, and trust. These qualities become the foundation that can sustain you when promotion comes. A door that looks disappointing might be the very one that protects you from being destroyed by success you're not ready for. An excellent example of this in modern life would be a young teacher who dreamed of becoming a motivational speaker, traveling the world to inspire thousands. Instead, the only opportunity that opened was teaching in a small, struggling school in a poor community. On the surface, it looked far from destiny. It looked like limitation. But in those classrooms, the teacher learned how to connect with people, how to communicate, and how to inspire in real and personal ways. Years later, when doors opened for larger audiences, the foundation had already been built in that humble classroom. What seemed like a detour was actually the preparation that made the dream possible. This is why we cannot judge the doors God opens only by appearance. The small door you are tempted to despise might be the very place where God is shaping your destiny. The uncomfortable season you wish you could escape may be the key to unlocking the strength, wisdom, and resilience you'll need later. The ordinary, the overlooked, and even the painful are often the places God uses to release extraordinary purpose. So when you stand before a door that doesn't look like what you imagined, don't turn away too quickly. Don't despise the small beginnings or the ordinary assignments. Trust that God sees what you cannot. What looks like limitation to you might actually be the exact opening He designed for your greatest assignment. The door may not look like destiny, but it leads to it. Whenever God places a door of destiny in front of you, It rarely comes without resistance. Fear always positions itself at the threshold, whispering reasons why you cannot go through. It tells you that you are not good enough, not strong enough, not prepared enough. It convinces you that failure is inevitable and that you should retreat before you embarrass yourself. But the presence of fear is not a signal to walk away. It is often confirmation that you are standing exactly where you need to be. The enemy will not waste his energy guarding doors that lead nowhere. Fear shows up precisely because what lies on the other side of that door is valuable, purposeful, and capable of changing not just your life, but the lives of others. The greatest opportunities in life almost always arrive wrapped in intimidation. When you feel afraid, it's easy to assume that you must be in the wrong place, but in truth, the size of your fear is often proportional to the size of your future. If the door didn't matter, there would be no opposition. This is why so many people spend their lives stuck in the hallway of hesitation, staring at doors but never moving forward. They confuse fear with a stop sign, when really it is just a test of faith. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward in spite of it. God allows fear to be stationed at the door so that you learn to lean on Him instead of your own strength. If you could face the opportunity without trembling, you might assume you could succeed without God. But when your knees shake, when your hands sweat, and when your mind races with doubts, you are reminded that you cannot do this alone. It pushes you to trust the one who called you and to rely on His power, not your own. Fear, then, is not a barrier meant to stop you, but a signpost pointing you to faith. Think of Joshua standing before the promised land. God had already told him, "Be strong and courageous, for I am with you." Why would God repeat those words over and over if Joshua felt no fear? Because courage is only needed when fear is present. The giants and fortified cities in Canaan were intimidating, but they were proof that the land was valuable. If the land had been empty and easy to claim, it would not have required faith, nor would it have fulfilled God's promise. The very fact that fear loomed at the door was evidence that Joshua was standing in front of something worth possessing. A powerful modern example of this can be seen in someone preparing to speak publicly for the first time. Imagine a young woman who feels called to share her story of overcoming addiction. She knows her testimony can inspire others, but every time she stands in front of a microphone, fear grips her heart. Her voice shakes, her hands tremble, and she feels the urge to walk away. Everything in her screams, "You can't do this." Yet when she chooses to speak anyway, lives are touched, hope is restored, and people find the courage to fight their own battles. The fear never fully disappears, but each time she walks through it, she discovers that her voice carries the power to heal others. The fear guarding the door was proof that what lay beyond it mattered deeply. This is the reality for anyone facing a God-given door. Fear is not your enemy, surrendering to fear is. The only way to silence its lies is to step forward in faith. You may never feel fully ready, but readiness is not the requirement. Obedience is. On the other side of fear lies growth, purpose, and fulfillment. When you face the trembling moment, remember that fear is not a sign you should turn back. It is confirmation that you are on the edge of something significant. If you will press past the intimidation, you will find that the very place you feared the most is the place where God reveals His greatest power in your life. One of the greatest struggles people face when standing before a new opportunity or a fresh season in life is the desire for absolute certainty. We want guarantees, blueprints, and visible evidence that everything will work out exactly as we hope before we dare to move. The human heart longs for control, and we often convince ourselves that unless we know every detail, it is safer to stay still. But the reality of walking with God is that He does not promise certainty. He promises His presence. The doors He sets before us are not designed to reveal the entire future in advance, but to invite us into trust. Faith is not about having every answer neatly arranged. It is about trusting the one who holds the keys and stepping forward even when your vision is limited. When you wait for certainty, you remain stuck in hesitation. You never move because you keep asking, what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? What if I'm wrong? And while you wait, time passes, opportunities slip away, and your potential remains locked behind doors that you never dared to open. Faith, on the other hand, is action in the absence of clarity. It is moving when you don't see the full staircase, but trusting that the next step will appear when your foot comes down. The miracle is often activated not in the waiting, but in the walking. Throughout Scripture, we see examples of people who had to move without certainty. Abraham was told to leave his homeland and go to the place I will show you. God didn't give him a map or a detailed plan. All Abraham had was a promise and the presence of God. Yet it was that step into the unknown that made him the father of nations. The Israelites at the Red Sea had no certainty that the waters would part. They were trapped between the waves and their enemies, but when they moved forward in obedience, the miracle unfolded. Each of these stories reminds us that certainty is not the foundation of faith. Trust is. The reason God often withholds certainty is because if you knew everything in advance, faith would no longer be required. If you saw the entire picture, you would rely on your knowledge, not His presence. God wants you to learn that His faithfulness is revealed step by step, not all at once. It is in the unknown that you discover His power. The uncertainty of the path makes room for the certainty of His character. He may not tell you what is waiting on the other side of the door, but He assures you that He will walk through it with you. That is more secure than any blueprint you could create for yourself. Consider the example of a young man who felt called to start a business that would serve his community. He had a vision, but very little money and no business degree and no certainty about whether people would support him. Fear whispered that it would be safer to stay at his stable job. But something inside urged him to trust God and take the first step. He began with a small shop, unsure if it would succeed. The early days were difficult, but over time, the business grew, provided jobs for others, and became a place of impact. Looking back, he realized he never had certainty when he started, but he had God's presence, and that was enough. The miracle unfolded only after he walked through the door. This is the lesson for us. Waiting for certainty will paralyze you, but walking in faith will position you for breakthrough. You don't need to see the whole picture. You only need to know the painter. Faith is stepping into the unknown while trusting that God already knows what is waiting there. The trembling in your legs and the questions in your mind do not disqualify you. In fact, they make your obedience all the more powerful because you are choosing trust over control. So when you find yourself hesitating at the doorway of opportunity, remember this truth. God did not call you to be certain. He called you to be faithful. The door will not open while you stand analyzing it. It opens when you step forward. And though you may not know what lies ahead, you can rest in the assurance that the one who chose the door will also walk through it with you. There is a place in life that many people find themselves stuck in without realizing it. The hallway. The hallway is the space between where you've been and where you're supposed to go next. It's the season of waiting, the stage of uncertainty. The place where doors surround you, but you don't know which one to choose. The hallway is not wrong in itself because transition is a natural part of life. The problem comes when you start treating the hallway like it is your permanent residence. You were never meant to set up camp there. The hallway is a temporary place, a space for reflection and preparation, but it is not a place where you are supposed to spend your whole life. The danger of the hallway is that it creates the illusion of safety. In the hallway, you don't have to risk failure. You don't have to face rejection, and you don't have to step into the unknown. You can stand still, analyzing, weighing your options, waiting for the perfect sign. But in reality, staying in the hallway is its own kind of failure because it keeps you from walking into the rooms God has already prepared for you. Opportunity cannot be experienced in the hallway. It can only be encountered when you step through the door. Many people stay in the hallway because of fear. They are afraid of choosing the wrong door, so they choose no door at all. Others stay there because of comfort. The hallway may not be fulfilling, but it feels familiar. And the familiar often feels safer than the uncertain. Still others remain there because of overthinking. They want 100% certainty before they move. And because they never get it, they never act. What they don't realize is that indecision is a decision in itself. By refusing to move, they are choosing to stay stuck. The truth is, you will never know everything about what is behind the door until you step through it. And that's okay, because God doesn't call you to full knowledge. He calls you to trust Him. The hallway was meant to be a place of passing through, not a place of living. You can't keep standing there forever, staring at the doors, waiting for some perfect moment that may never come. At some point, you have to stop hesitating, take a breath, and move. An excellent example of this can be seen in the story of Peter when Jesus called him to step out of the boat and walk on water. The boat was Peter's hallway. It was safe, it was familiar, and it kept him from risk. But the miracle was not in the boat, it was on the waves. As long as Peter stayed in the boat, he was comfortable but unfulfilled. The moment he stepped out, even though he stumbled, he experienced something extraordinary that none of the other disciples did. The hallway may feel secure, but it will never hold your destiny. Only when you move beyond the hallway can you experience the miraculous. In your own life, there may be opportunities, dreams, or callings that you've been circling around for years, always thinking about, but never acting on. You've been in the hallway long enough. That idea you keep revisiting, that relationship you keep praying about, that step of faith you keep delaying. The hallway is not your home. God didn't bring you this far just to have you stuck between what was and what could be. The doors are before you, and His Spirit is nudging you to move. At some point, you have to stop analyzing and start acting. You don't need to know exactly how everything will work out. You just need to know the one who is leading you. You cannot stay in the hallway forever. It's time to stop lingering, stop questioning, stop doubting, and step into the room of destiny that God has already prepared. Your future is not behind you, and it is not in the hallway. It is waiting behind the door. And the only way to reach it is to walk through. When you think about walking through the door that God has placed before you, it is easy to assume the decision is all about you, your faith, your obedience, your destiny, and your future. While those things are true, there is a far bigger picture. Your life is never lived in isolation. The steps you take, the risks you embrace, and the faith you demonstrate have ripple effects that extend far beyond your own story. When you walk through the door God has chosen, others find courage to walk through theirs. Your obedience becomes more than personal breakthrough. It becomes a testimony that shows others what is possible. People are always watching, often more closely than you realize. They see your struggles, they hear your doubts, and they notice when you step out in faith despite the fear. And something powerful happens when you move forward. It unlocks courage in others who were paralyzed in their own hallway of hesitation. Sometimes your step through the door is the very thing that gives them the confidence to believe they can do it too. Your story becomes a map for someone else's journey, pointing the way toward hope, faith, and victory. This is why it is so important not to underestimate your obedience. What feels like a small decision to you may be a lifeline to someone else. When you walk into healing, someone else believes they can recover. When you walk into purpose, someone else sees that their calling is possible too. When you walk into freedom, others who are bound start to believe chains can break. You may not even be aware of who is watching or how deeply they are affected, but God often uses one act of courage to ignite faith in a whole community. There is a phrase often used in leadership: courage is contagious. That principle is spiritual as well. When you take a step into the unknown and trust God, the courage inside of you spreads. People see that it can be done, and suddenly what once felt impossible begins to feel attainable. That's why your decision to move forward is never just about you. It carries weight for those who come after you. A powerful example of this is found in the story of David and Goliath. For 40 days, the army of Israel stood frozen in fear, watching a giant mock them. No one dared to move. But then a young shepherd boy stepped onto the battlefield with nothing but a sling and a stone. David's victory over Goliath was not just his own breakthrough, it unleashed courage in an entire nation. Once the giant fell, the soldiers who had been paralyzed with fear suddenly surged forward in confidence and chased down their enemy. One boy's obedience to walk through the door of battle unlocked the courage of an entire army. David's decision wasn't only about him, it was about those who needed to see that victory was possible. In modern life, this can be seen in someone who overcomes great odds and then uses that victory to inspire others. Think of a single mother who goes back to school, finishes her degree, and builds a new life for her children. Her courage not only changes her family's future, but also inspires other parents in similar situations to believe they can do the same. Her choice to walk through the door of education and perseverance becomes a testimony that lights the way for others. The truth is that somebody is waiting on the other side of your obedience. They are waiting for your story, your testimony, your courage. If you stay in the hallway paralyzed by fear or indecision, not only do you miss out on what God has for you, but others may miss the example they needed to move forward themselves. That is why your step of faith carries such importance. It is not simply personal, it is generational. So when you stand before the door and fear tempts you to turn back, remember this: you are not walking just for yourself. You are walking for the ones who will find strength in your story, who will see your courage and discover their own. The victory God wants to give you is not only meant to bless your life, but to create a ripple effect of faith. When you walk through, others will follow. And one step of obedience can become the spark that lights courage in countless lives. God already chose the door. He didn't ask your opinion. He didn't need your qualifications. He didn't wait for you to feel ready. He chose it before you were even born. And now the only question is, will you walk through it? Don't let fear rob you. Don't let doubt delay you. Don't let hesitation hold you hostage in the hallway. The door is waiting. Destiny is waiting. And your future is waiting. So take a deep breath. Lift your head, square your shoulders, and step through the door. Because when God opens it, no man, no devil, no circumstance can shut it.